Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Top Voice Tuesday on May 20th. We're already halfway through May, more than halfway through May, which is hard to believe. And I'm excited for today's conversation with Wendy Shore Rossano. Wendy, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself in a moment. To talk about this idea of niching down to scale up. And I love paradoxical things. And so I'm excited for this conversation. Before we do that, for those of you that are dialing in, please do let us know in the chat where you're coming in from, and feel free to put comments and questions. We will get to those. And as always, this episode will be on my YouTube channel later today, Michael J. Lopez 9. All of our Top Voice Tuesday episodes are there, and you can subscribe to that and get a chance to see back conversations. So with that, Wendy, I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and, most importantly, tell us, how did you get to the top of the Top Voice Mountain?
So for those people I haven't met before, my name is Wendy Shore. It rhymes with entrepreneur. And I have been an entrepreneur for close to 30 years. So I come with 30 years of experience. And as you and I have discussed, I also have a background in accounting. So I was a former CPA. And currently I help solopreneurs, intentional solopreneurs, and industry executives to launch a profitable solopreneur business that aligns with their lifestyle and their revenue goals. And one of the things we do is finding a niche. And I know you and I are going to speak about that today. Now, the Top Voice, that's very interesting. And the real answer is, I don't know, right? Like, none of us really know how they award the Top Voice. But I will tell you that I had a Top Voice, or I received the Top Voice honor when I had just over 1,000 followers. Wow. So I did not have a ton of followers, but I really feel that when I got on LinkedIn, when I got on the platform, just trying to give a lot of knowledge and a lot of information, right? No gatekeeping. And I feel that in order to build trust and build authority, right, especially where we have this trust deficit, because so many people have gotten hurt, invested in things that, where they didn't deliver. The best marketer got the sale kind of thing. I think it's important to really show up and give it your all, and don't withhold information. And then your people will find you and they'll want to work with you because they'll want to expedite the process.
Yeah. No, that's great. I didn't realize you did it with 1,000. I did it with about 3,000. And what I think is interesting, that there's a little light bulb that just went off for me as you said that. A lot of us were chosen and picked and recognized for the type of content, maybe our own niche, what we were talking about. But it's clear that the algorithm wasn't just about who has the most followers. In July, we're going to have Corey Warfield on. I think Corey might actually be one of the most followed LinkedIn people. And I won't steal his thunder of his story, but he's got like 500,000 people. And so for people like you and I to have 1,000, 3,000, 4,000, I think it's really cool and gratifying, and maybe encouraging to others that it's not about the numbers, right? It's about the value you deliver, what you share, how you comment. So I just love that you're able to tell that story, Wendy. That's great.
Thank you. And I don't think in this case, when it comes to the Top Voices, I don't think it's an algorithm. I actually think that real people at LinkedIn are looking at content and they're going, okay. And then they start looking, right? And they start following. Yeah. I've had the honor of being at LinkedIn headquarters. I was there yesterday. That was my 4th time there, and they're amazing. And they really, really want the people who are on the platform to succeed. I mean, yes, they're a business first, sure, but as a business owner, we want our people to succeed. And so they're really dedicated to helping their members on their platform to succeed.
Yeah. I haven't been to the San Francisco one yet. I need to go do that. So that's got to be on my list. Before we get into our first question, we've got folks from Detroit. We've got folks from Puerto Rico, Los Angeles, Wichita, Ghana. I think that's the first time we've ever had someone from Ghana. So thanks everyone from joining in. Please do put your questions in. But let's get to this conversation about struggling to define your niche. Let's maybe start with that. Why do so many people, from your perspective, struggle to get really clear and specific about the niche that they occupy in the market, in the ecosystem? Let's start with that.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. First of all, when you start a business, you have all this knowledge, right? You have this breadth of knowledge. Like, I used to call myself a multi-potentialite because I had a lot of skills that were learned, hard-earned skills that I learned. And so I felt like I could help a lot of people do a lot of things. And I didn't want to narrow myself down, right? And so do I help people with their finances, right? Because I have the accounting background. Do I help people with business growth strategy? I grew from one restaurant to five, right? Do I help people with this? Do I help people with that? Like, there's so many different things that I could really help with. So, okay, the decision was I'm going to help many people with many things. And then I don't just help solopreneurs, I can help like small to mid-sized businesses grow too, right? And so why am I going to narrow it down? And so you start, when you start your business, you just start fumbling around and seeing what works, what feels right. You try a couple of things here, you try a couple of things here, and that's okay, right? That's okay to try it. But that's not going to last for very long, especially when it comes to creating content, right? And showing up on platforms like LinkedIn. You have to really get clear and focused. And, we've said, niche down to scale up, right? And so I had a really hard time figuring out what I wanted to do. And for a long time, I decided to concentrate on small to mid-sized businesses. And, that was good. That was good for a while. But then what I also found out is when I was helping solopreneurs, right, I enjoyed that so much more,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because I felt like their success was my success. So I feel that sometimes you find your niche, but sometimes your niche finds you. And then it's not just solopreneurs, right? For me, it's solopreneurs who either have gotten started already and kind of feel stuck, or industry executives that understand business, right? And are wanting to start their own thing. But for somebody who's never really worked in an executive position, but wants to start a business and needs to learn everything from the ground up, there are other people who do that, but that is not somebody who I enjoy working with.
Yeah.
Sometimes I mentor them, but I don't work with them.
You've said a couple things that I want to dig into, and I love that story. First of all, you said early on in your career, we sort of fumble around, and I love that phrase in the sense that I think it gives people license to experiment and understand that it's messy and a little bit awkward. It takes some experimentation, some guesswork. You try something, you realize, hey, that doesn't feel right for whatever reason. And so I just love that you're giving people license to have that experience, because it's very normal. If you've gone through that, it's very normal, right? I went through the same thing. I had been a professional change consultant for 20 years before I started my own company, and yet I was still fumbling around learning new things. Number one. Number two, being clear about the problem you solve, I think, as you were describing this, is I could solve a lot of problems, but what's the match between the problem I solve and maybe where I get my own motivation and how I get that energy? So let's take that and kind of go down and say, okay, I've figured out the problem I've solved through experimentation, learning, trial and error. There's this counterintuitive idea that the more specific I get, the more I can expand. Tell us why that works.
So again, I'll go back to my own story, which is I was part of this group of that I had met on Clubhouse. Remember the old Clubhouse days? And a group of women came and stayed with me in my house. And they were looking at some awards I had on the wall. And one woman said to me, Wendy, I really think you're such a great business person. Like, you're always giving great advice. What do you do? And I realized it was kind of this aha moment for me that I was doing too much. And so if anybody needed my services, they didn't know what I really did, right? So there were people who had multiple problems. I can solve multiple problems, but nobody really knew what I did. So I started looking into, how do I get my message out there? And I realized, and people say this, when you talk to everybody, you talk to nobody.
Mm.
But it's really true, because what happens is, if I'm talking about a specific problem, right? And you're listening to me and you're going, wow, I have that problem. And you're like, this is great. This is fabulous, right? This person understands exactly what I'm going through. And then I start talking about something else that doesn't relate to you at all. It doesn't even relate to the solopreneur. It relates to, maybe, ramp up for founders or whatever the case may be. Then you're like, oh yeah, I'm not paying attention anymore, because
Right.
it doesn't relate to me. And people only pay attention to things that affect them, right? And nobody cares who you are until they know how you can help them.
Mm.
So,
Interesting.
so, you know, there's an analogy. There's a fishing analogy when it comes to a niche, right? You look at finding your clients like going fishing. So if I want to find clients in this arena, I have to make sure that I'm speaking to them. I have to make sure that I understand their pain points. I have to get real clear with them on how I'm going to solve their problem. If I want to catch tuna, I know I'm going to need certain bait. I'm going to need certain rods. I know I'm
Mm.
going to have to go out into the ocean. I'm not going to go to a lake to try and catch tuna,
Right.
right? And I'm going to bring different bait. Now, if I go out and I'm trying to catch tuna, I may catch some wahoo too, right? Because the wahoo is going to hang out where the tuna is. So by limiting, by concentrating on one thing, it doesn't mean you're not going to catch others or you're not going to expand. And so people feel, if I choose that one, that I'm limiting myself,
Yeah.
but you're really not. That one knows they need you, and they're going to find you, and you're going to get the people who are adjacent to them as well. So you actually open a door. You don't put yourself in a box.
Yeah. Oh, I love that phrase. I will share and relate to my own experience of, I remember the first version of my website that I built when I started my company and what it looks like now. There was a lot of stuff on there, right? We tend to kind of throw up everything that we could do because, hey, somebody might need X, Y, or Z. And the truth is, when people ask me, Michael, what do? You asked me this, we were talking before we went live, right? It's very
Yes.
simple. I help individuals, teams, and organizations change and transform. That's it. Now, what makes me different is not what I do, but how I do it. And that requires some conversation. But now all of my content is built around that message, right? What is the unique attribute around that? It doesn't mean, to your point, that I haven't solved other problems for people, but it just means that that repetition and that consistency. And that's how I started on LinkedIn. I had one goal, which was to kind of tell the no BS conversation about change, because I thought we were having the wrong conversation, right? So this idea of niching down to the problem you solve and sharpening your message, I want to come back to that. I've certainly learned this. How do you help people do that? Like, what are some tips and tricks for, this is the problem I solve, but my message has to be customized a little bit for the audience I'm targeting?
Well, first I have to get real clear on what it is they're offering, and one of the problems is, so many people offer too much, and so their message becomes convoluted that way as well, right? Because you have this offer, and then you have this offer, and then you do this, and you have this offer. And even though it may be around the same general solution, they're different. And people don't know where to go. And so they get confused. So one of the things that I like to do is, okay, let's pick out the one thing. And,
Mm.
and that's going to go to the data. When I started working mostly with solopreneurs, right? And I would even say small businesses. I was concentrating on women entrepreneurs, and I love working with women entrepreneurs. But I realized from the people who are following me and the people who are reaching out to me that that wasn't necessarily my niche, because I was attracting male entrepreneurs,
Mm.
right? I think I have like a lot of masculine energy, so I was attracting male entrepreneurs. Um, so I had to redefine my messaging. So one of the things is you have to look at the data, right? Who are you attracting? Because if your message is not attracting who you think is your niche, then do you change your messaging or do you change your niche? Right? And then that's another whole decision. The other thing is content. It's difficult. It's not easy to create content, and it's not easy to create content that converts,
Mm.
right? And what I mean by that is you don't want every one of your pieces of content that you're putting out there to be like, buy my services, buy my services, buy my services, right? Because people don't want to be sold to. But what you want to do is tell them how you solve the problem that they have, things you've done yourself with that problem, things you've done for clients with your problem, right? And make it more educational with real step by steps. Don't, like, people say, oh, give them the what, but don't give them the how, right? I'm sure you've probably heard that.
I have, yeah.
You know what? Give them the how. Listen, the truth is that most people still want somebody to help them with it, right? I know myself, like, you can't read the ingredients from inside the box. And I can sit with anybody and in moments start having this conversation, and my mind starts going a million miles an hour and I come up with amazing ideas for them. And I sit down and I do it for myself, and it's like staring at a blank TV,
It's
right?
not the
Like, I'm
same,
like,
right?
I don't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I'm actually starting a program where I'm going to help people with that content, because people are using AI, and there's nothing wrong with AI. I use it,
Of
right?
course. Yeah, we all do.
But not using it to replace you, so you still have to have the understanding of why you're creating the content, the way you're creating it, and how it relates to really helping people, that leads to inbound leads, as opposed to trying to go out there and chase,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go back. I want to go back to something you said just a moment ago, because I think it's really important about this idea of, do I change my niche or do I change my message? And there's a couple comments in the chat from Jackie going through this assessment herself. Evan said, to your comment earlier about find your niche, sometimes your niche finds you. So what are the signals that I might interact with or see that tells me I should change my niche or I should change my message? What would I be getting as feedback from? Sometimes it's hard data, sometimes it's more maybe experiential data. What would I
Yes.
be seeing, and how would I decide that I should change one or the other?
Well, the data will tell you who you're attracting, right? Then the decision has to be a personal decision, So if, for example, I only wanted to work with female entrepreneurs, then I would change my messaging, right? Because, and listen, I love working with female entrepreneurs because I'm very lucky that I have a lot of business experience, but a lot of women didn't.
Hmm.
And so I can help them, where I think more men were out in the workforce and had more experience. Some moms were stay-at-home moms, whatever, trying to work, started a business, had the thing. And, services can be so varied. I had a client who taught people how to crochet. I mean, and then from there, we, expanded the service offerings to where she would ship them the yarn just for that project. And it was kind of a fun thing, right? Um, but you never know what the product's going to be. So going back to, I think it has to be a personal decision, right? So you pivot, you change your messaging, but then you have to keep watching it, right? You have to keep saying, all right, am I now attracting who I want to attract, or am I hearing crickets, right? And that's the same thing with a product. When you have a great offer, and if it's not converting, but it's good, sometimes it's just your messaging that's off. You're trying to sell the solution, not the problem, right? And so you just have to keep your eye on the data. You change the messaging a little bit. It would be a tweak. But then you see if that's what's happening. And if not, then you maybe have to reassess your whole business model.
Yeah. How long is a good window for us to keep that time horizon before I shift something? Is it a month? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a quarter? Does it depend?
I think you need like a month to really see like a trend, right? I think you'll start seeing the shift sooner than that. But at the end of a month, you evaluate and you go, okay, you know what? I'm starting to get more feedback. I'm starting to get more comments. I'm starting to get more, and then there's reach out on your part too, right? It's not you just creating content and sitting back and waiting for people to come to you. You want to reach out to people as well. You want to engage with other people's content. You want to make sure that you're building relationships. And so then your reach out would probably be more towards, the niche you want to work with as opposed to the niche you were attracting, right? As your messaging changes.
Right. This is such a there's a phrase I use, particularly when I work with clients, which is, I call it sense and adjust, right? Which is I'll work in change projects with clients, and we're trying things to create engagement in the organization, help people shift their behavior, align to a new process, whatever it may be. And you try things and you go, okay, hey, Wendy really responded to this one, but maybe Michael didn't. So am I sensing that the team is moving and shifting, or do I need to make a change? I tend to use a quarter, 90 days. We know that there's some science behind the 60 to 90 day window for habits, but everybody's different. So let's say we've made an adjustment. I've changed my messaging. What happens next? How you mentioned content, and I want to get into that because we talked to Rachel about this the other day. How do I line up my content with my messaging now, and how do I keep that fresh, interesting, but also make it stand out, right? Because there's so much out there, right? There's so much out there. And again, I think you've mentioned, we tend to feel that the more specific we get, the more limited we are. And that creates a lot of anxiety. So what do we do next? I figured out my niche. I've got my message. How do I build content that lines up to that?
Well, I think to stand out today, there has to be the personalization, right? Because anybody can throw something in AI and it's going to come out. And that's why, I don't know if you've noticed, I tend to talk about this, and I just talked about it with Melissa Cohen in our live. A lot of the content's just starting to sound the same.
Yeah.
And AI has upped everybody's game, right? So we're producing faster, right? So I think it has to be, and I hate to use the word authentically, but what sets you apart, right? Your voice sets you apart. Your experiences set you apart. And I think a little bit you have to talk about that, I think you really have to know your subject, because AI can put out stuff that may be technically right, but not right in the context that you're trying to explain. And so if you don't know and you post something out there, you're going to start eroding your trust factor, right? So I think getting real clear on your offer, knowing who you're talking to, and that one problem now that you're trying to solve, it all goes into one messaging.
Yeah.
And you work on that for a while and you see the feedback. And you may think it's boring, right? Because you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. But think of it like a parade, right? So you have a float on the parade and the float's going by. And the float sees you now, Michael, and now it comes to me, and now it's going by and it's going to hit. So we're not all on social media at the same time. We're not all seeing everything that's being posted, right? So when you repost things, you're going to hit different people. Different times of the day, it's going to hit different people. Different days of the week, it's going to hit different people. Now, changing it up a little bit, meaning same message in a carousel, same message with a picture, same message, and you don't use the exact same words, you change. And that's where I think AI can be very helpful,
Mhm.
right? You write something and then you ask it to reword it for you, right? So it's the same thing from your idea, but worded slightly differently.
Yeah, I love that analogy of a parade. I think everyone listening, we focus so much on the variety of our experience and trying to keep it fresh and interesting. And what I love about what you just said is that no, you've got to remember there's people at the end of the parade who haven't seen anything yet and they want the same experience. And so that actually just really helped me. I mean, I talk about change a lot, so I guess I've hit the repetition mark, but always finding ways to remember, like with my book, my publisher said this to me. If someone reads your book a year from now, it's still the first time they've ever read it.
Right.
And I was like, oh wow, it's not just new in January when we released it. It's new the first time forever.
Absolutely.
And that's a great reminder, I think, to everyone about this idea that keeping on message, which is just the idea of repeating it enough so that someone who cares will find it.
Right. Right.
And I think that
Exactly.
that's a really great analogy. We're coming up to the end. This goes by quick because we just
Wow. It
so
really
great.
did.
Yeah, yeah, really great conversations. As you know, we have a bonus question for you, but I like to end the formal part with just a summary. So Wendy, what are the three things that you'd like people to take away from this idea of sort of niching down to scale up?
I think the most important thing is realizing that a niche doesn't limit you. It actually helps grow your business, because when somebody has a specific problem and you have that solution and they know you have that solution, you're the person they're looking for. So realize that it also doesn't mean you're only going to do that one thing. What it means is that your messaging is only around that one thing, right? And you can still do other things for that person, because once somebody starts working with you, then they'll know the breadth of what you can do. So don't be afraid to niche down. Don't be afraid to talk about the one thing, and don't be afraid to repeat the information because somebody didn't hear it yet and they need to.
I
I guess
love
those
that.
are the three things.
I love that. I love that. Um, and I think it's just a great reminder for everyone, right? That being specific is not being small, right? This idea that focus, and this is one of the things I talk about in my book. Focus is an incredible enabler to learning, to motivation, to growth, right? You have to be able to focus on something. If you're looking at everything, by definition, you're looking at nothing, right? And so that's a really important reminder.
Well,
Um,
let me just say this, Michael.
yeah,
So you talk about change, and people who are going to go through that within their organization, whether they're a solopreneur or a big corporation, you talk about change. Now, if you talked tomorrow about how you can found a business or how you could start bootstrapping a business, that's not what you do.
right,
And so the people who need change or are looking for that, they're going to stop listening to you.
right.
So you've gotten very clear on what it is you talk about. And that makes you the expert in that. So somebody, now here's the thing, I may not need what you have to offer, but I may come across somebody who's going to need that. And you're going to be the first person that comes to my mind. And you're going to say, oh, you have to speak to Michael. I already know you. I have trust in you. And I know what you do.
Yeah, I love that. And I would
Very,
add,
yeah.
I would add this idea that for anyone in this experience, there's a measure of patience, right? We're in such a hurry to grow, to sell, to deliver, and that's normal. Is that you've got to learn to sit in the time periods of the repetition and the feedback to get enough data to say, am I on or am I off, and how do I need to adjust? So I think it's just a great reminder. Wendy, I want to get to your bonus question as we wrap up here. This is a question left by the last guest, and here for the next guest, a fun way to get to know you. So here's your question:
Okay.
what would make you give up everything you're working on for something different that's work related, right? So giving up what you do to change entirely. what would be the energy that would help you shift into an entirely new space and domain to change your niche?
Currently, I don't think there's anything that would. I really like if I won $1 million lottery tomorrow, I would just say, "Oh, I have $1 million to actually maybe put towards and grow," and or I wouldn't change what I'm doing because I really like what I'm doing. I think no, I don't think there's anything that I could think of off the top of my head that would make me change at this moment
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
What I love about that, and these questions line up so perfectly, it's kind of funny how they relate to the topic, is when you know what you're good at and you know what you're passionate about and you know the problem you solve, there really isn't anything that could move you off of that point. It's just what enables you to do more, go bigger, and scale up, which I think is just a great reminder to everyone about using that passion to find a business that really matches what you do. Uh, Wendy, I want to give you the last opportunity to share anything and offer to listeners ways to reach out and connect with you. You mentioned your content program. Anything you'd like to leave people with before we go?
So yep, so that actually was supposed to be a secret, but I kind of we're launching that in July.
Late breaking
Um,
news. I like it.
yes, early break. We're going to announce it in a couple of weeks, but yep, it's going to be launched. I guess just get in touch with me on LinkedIn at Wendy Shore, Wendy Shore Rossano, but I go by Wendy Shore, which is my maiden name. And if anybody's interested in that, or I'm also launching another program that will be launching in September called Solopreneur 90. I'm all about the quarter too.
Love
And
it.
it's 90 days to a profitable solopreneur business, where we're going to talk about how to narrow down your niche, how to find out what is that one offer you should be working on. We'll do a whole bunch of other stuff that sort of along the lines of planning profitable growth.
I love it, and that's a very generous offer for people to reach out to you and connect and get involved in those programs.
Yes.
Wendy, thank you again. Just a ton of knowledge and insight here. I think it's going to be really helpful for people, for everyone dialing in. Thanks for being a part of the Top Voice Tuesday community. Again, this episode will be up on my YouTube channel, Michael J. Lopez 9, in a couple hours, and you can watch all the back episodes. Please subscribe to that. And on Friday, we take this conversation, we turn it into a newsletter with other insights from my book and send that out to folks that want to be part of that community. You can find that on my website. I'll put the link in the post. Thanks again, Wendy. Have a wonderful week, everyone. We'll see you
Very
next time.
enjoyable. Thank you.
Bye-bye.